Hi, my name is Dale Comstock. In this segment, I want to talk about firearm selection for women in a home self-defense situation. So, again, I want to be very specific. It's what type of weapon would you offer a woman in a home to protect herself? And so, I know this is always an interesting dialectic because everybody wants to talk. Everybody has their opinions on what they think is the best weapon and so forth and so on. So, what I'm going to do is articulate um, the weapon system I prefer and why. Again, specifically for home self-defense. We're not talking about street carry or anything else, but again, uh, if a woman were to find herself in a home invasion scenario where she wakes up, maybe she's got kids in the house, um, and she knows there's an intruder or intruders in the house, what weapon would I advise her to pick up and use, and why, and under what circumstances? We talk about firearms for self-defense. There's a lot of different weapons that we can think of that can be used for self-defense. Obviously, we hear every day the M4, the AR-15, the assault rifle, which is technically not an assault rifle, AK-47s. We talk about things like the Glocks and the 45s and the handguns and stuff like that. There's a variety of weapons out there, and they all have their application. Some are better for certain scenarios versus other scenarios. So, it's really a matter of understanding your needs. And then when you do understand your needs, matching the weapon system to your needs, and then training on that weapon system so that you're proficient at it. Okay. Find a qualified instructor, someone who actually knows what they're doing. And I say who actually knows what they're doing because there's a lot of guys out there and girls that really don't know what they're doing. And so, no point knowing a firearm if you can't use it properly, nor can you use it safely because now it becomes a liability. So, we'll talk about more about things like weapons, ammunition selection later on, and some of the other nuances about the firearms training and firearms safety in the subsequent segments. But for this point, we're going to stick to right now, real quick. Firearm selection and my opinion on what I think is the best weapon for women in a home self-defense situation. So there's an array of weapons that we can choose from for, again, self-defense, in particular for women. So a lot of factors you have to consider in firearm selection. One is the level of training and experience that a woman has with firearms. So, and again, that's all relative experience, right? That's really subjective, and a lot of times it's based on other people's so-called experts, their opinion. So let's just assume that for the sake of this argument, a woman has very little experience. She's experienced enough to know how to carry the weapon, load the weapon, carry the weapon safely, how to discharge the weapon, how to render it safe, and how to clear the weapon and store it properly. Let's say, assume that she knows how to do all those things. As far as her marksmanship is concerned, she's not, she has minimal time to go to the range. In fact, she probably goes once a year or once every 6 months because, to be honest with you, for most women, that's actually a stretch. So would you hand we'll just argue, would you hand your wife, for example, a 45 ACP for a self-defense gun, or even a small caliber 9mm, a 9mm small weapon like a 9mm, whatever, it could be a Glock 16 or something that fits in her hand. And the problem with that is there's variables that have to be factored in. For example, she understand recoil management, sight alignment, sight picture, trigger press, and all the fundamentals that go with delivering an accurate shot, especially the first time the bullet leaves the weapon. So, and then you have to consider things like what's the anticipated range that you may have to engage somebody in your home. So, for example, in one of my homes, I had actually a 3-story home. And literally from the 3rd floor, you could see all the way down to the 1st floor. Large open area, large, living room, dining room area. So you really had a long shot that could potentially be, a 15-meter, 30 to 45-foot shot easily from an elevated position in defilade. So again, could could someone make that kind of a shot, a woman make that kind of a shot with limited range time and with a handgun under extreme conditions, for example, low light conditions, multiple intruders, that's very dynamic situations start to unfold, and maybe kids in the house. There's a lot of variables that you have to really think about. So when you consider firearm selection, remember, take into account the shooter's experience, and comfort, the comfort level with the weapon. What your battlefield. What's your battlefield? In this scenario, we're talking about homes, home self-defense. Know the layout. Know things like what kind of ranges what's the maximum range this person could shoot from. Not only is it the maximum range this person could shoot from, what's the minimum range this person can find himself shooting from? For example, they round a corner and their threat is right there within a couple of feet. Can they take that shot from that point or not? And of course, a lot of that plays on tactics as well. And so, we could talk a little bit about tactics in the following segments to this one. But right now, what I want to just talk about is actual firearm selection. So my preference is for a woman that has a very limited range time, very limited marksmanship experience or ability, all those factors considered, I actually don't recommend a handgun. Handgun sounds okay. It seems like it's easy to access and get it used point and shoot. Well, it's not just point and shoot. It's basically point your weapon, aim, press the trigger, and make the gun go bang, and make that bullet go into the target. It could be a moving target, which it more likely will be under extreme conditions. Secondly, can you afford to throw around? If you have kids in the house, for example, and look at your angles. You sling around and it goes through drywall and hits your kid in a bedroom or something like that. Passes through several layers of drywall and hits somebody in several rooms away. So these are all important things to consider. What it really comes down to is having a weapon that has a high probability of stopping a threat with initial shot, and it's easy to aim, put in the action, and manipulate in those kind of conditions. So what is it? Where am I going with this? What's the weapon? And I know people will roll their eyes at this because at first it sounds a little extreme, but my recommendation is basically an AR-15 pistol. And why is it an AR-15 pistol? Here's the nice thing about the pistols, the AR-15 pistols. It's a rifle, basically. But you can get it with an 8-inch barrel, so it's very short. What you see pictured here is actually an FNFAL 7.62 pistol, not a 5.56 pistol, but it's got a bigger caliber, but basically it's the same principle, same length. It also has a collapsible stock. It's really not so much a collapsible stock in that it's a forearm grip that you attach to your forearm, which makes it really technically and legally a pistol. Anybody with one live brain cell can tell you can mount that stock in your shoulder, or that pistol grip, that forearm grip into your shoulder, and make it a shoulder stock. So it's short. You put a 2-point sling on it, makes it easier to sling it around your shoulder. Allows you to carry it in a low carry with one hand on the weapon. Actually leaves a second hand free, so that if you had to, for example, open bedroom doors, close doors, or if you had to grab your kids by the hand and you carry them out, or you had a baby in your hand, at least you still have that hand on the weapon, and you can still engage from even from the hip. Now, of course, when I'm aiming from the hip, I'm not actually looking at my sights, right? So there are adjunct systems that you can mount on a weapon like that. For example, I can put an aim point on there, not aim point, but excuse me, a laser on it, okay, a laser system, where I turn the laser on with a gun light, so it's integrated, white light and laser system. So now all I gotta do is just point the laser at whatever my target is, and it doesn't matter if it's at my hip or in my shoulder. Wherever that laser is pointed, that's where the bullet's gonna strike. It's also got a white light, so you have illumination. There's no guesswork even when it's dark, if you actually positively can identify your target. I do on this particular, I use this FNFL for example. I do have a small aim point on the top or an aiming dot, so that if I do bring the weapon up and mount it at my shoulders and take a cheek well, I can actually see the red dot. I'll superimpose the red dot on the target. The same thing, I pull the trigger. Now the thing about both systems, whether it's a laser system or an aim point type system or aim dot system, they're not zero to the shooter. They're zero to the line of bore of the weapon. In other words, it doesn't matter where you put that dot on that target. As long as you put that dot on target, that's where the bullet's going to strike. So you don't have to get a proper cheek well and proper sight alignment, front sight and rear sight, and it's not zero to you personally. It's actually the adjunct systems are zero to the gun or the weapon itself. So what does that mean? It means you can hand that weapon off to anybody and they can shoot just as accurate as you can with your weapon, as long as they superimpose that dot or that laser onto the target.